Hi, welcome to Positively Sparking, a podcast on internet marketing, online productivity and business. My name is Phil Byrne and today I'm with Richard Tubb, one of the UK's leading IT business consultants. Today we're going to be chatting about many of the day-to-day challenges that business owners of all kinds face everywhere. Discover how the techniques that Richard shares in his consultancy work, in his books, and on his successful blog can help you overcome them. Hi Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. How are you doing today, Phil?
Very good, Richard. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. The sun is shining up here in the northeast of England in Newcastle upon Tyne, so looking forward to a good day.
Well, let's hope we can do a sunny podcast as well. So Richard, for those of us who don't know you, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Richard Tubb, originally from Birmingham. I work in the IT industry. And what I do is I'm an IT business growth expert. What that means is I help technology companies really to free up their time, to concentrate on what's important, and essentially to make more money. The reason I do that is, well, first and foremost, I'm a massive geek, so I love technology. I love working in the tech industry. But I actually used to run an IT business, what's called a managed service provider, and that's a small IT business that looks after the IT for other small for other small businesses. And I ran that business for about 10 years in the Birmingham region, sold the business probably about 6-7 years ago now. And after I sold the business, I was approached by lots of other IT businesses who said, hey, now that you're no longer a competitor, perhaps you could tell us a bit more about how you grew the business. And it's flourished from there. So for the past few years, I've been doing that, helping other IT businesses to grow their own business.
Fantastic stuff. I love that transition you just mentioned there from competitor to colleague. That's really interesting, isn't it? You know, I'm sure everyone got to know you much better once you stopped being competition.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, I would love to say with hindsight that it was a grand plan of mine. You know, I planned to build up a business, to learn all there is to know about running an IT business, to sell it, and then to go into the consulting side of things to help other IT businesses. Unfortunately, Phil, I'd be lying if I said that was the case. It was more by accident. And the reason I'm doing what I'm doing at the moment is during the time I was running an IT business, I wrote a blog. I used to speak at peer groups, at user groups, and I used to be really open and honest about what worked for me and what didn't work for me within the IT business. And of course, that was speaking to essentially people who were my competitors. I can actually remember one of my close regional competitors coming up to me after a presentation I delivered once and saying, "Hey, Rick, thanks for the for the valuable info you gave, but why are you giving away all your trade secrets?" And I said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, this other people taught me how to do this. I've been really blessed with some of the smartest, most successful people in the IT industry sort of sharing freely of their knowledge with me. So I really just saw it as, passing that on. There are no trade secrets. There's enough clients around for everybody. But of course, I built up a reputation for being quite open and honest and sharing my knowledge and the many, many mistakes that I made, sharing those as well. So whilst I'd love to say that there was a clearly defined sort of goal of mine to become an IT business growth expert, the reality is, Phil, that, I did that whilst I was learning on the job. And then when I sold the business, it just became, a natural thing that other IT businesses picked up the phone to me and said, "Hey, we're comfortable about giving you a call to actually pay you to come in and help us grow our business now." So that's what led me to where I am.
You mentioned there being so open and honest about things that worked for you and things that didn't. And just before we started the podcast, we were chatting a little bit about culture in different places. And that is such a big one that lots of traditional focused industries have. I'm calling IT traditional. That sounds weird in a sentence. But what I really mean is that concept of keeping all your best stuff secret to yourself. And so you going out there and sharing it, do you think that's you as a person, or did someone along the way show you? that was a great way to go?
Do you know, I couldn't give you a definitive answer to that, but it is something that I've mulled over. And actually, you and I, just before we came on air, we were sharing. You used to live in New Mexico, over in the States, and I was just saying I've spent some time with my friends Joshua and Heidi from New Mexico who came to visit here in the UK, and we're actually talking about culture. But my background is when I first really got interested in essentially, instead of owning a job, owning a business. So, putting processes in place and learning how to grow a business. I actually flew across to the US and spent a lot of time over there. Now, I can't say definitively, but my gut feeling is that because I was so fortunate to spend time with a lot of people in the US who gave freely of their time and experience to me, I don't necessarily know it's a cultural thing for the US, but certainly in the US, there's a culture of celebrating success. And I think when we celebrate success, we're much more likely, to be open and honest and share the mistakes that we made, share what's worked for us, and so on. So I don't know if that answers your question, but certainly from a cultural perspective, I've always been really cool with, just sharing the mistakes that I've made, sharing what works for me, sharing what doesn't, because I'm assured that, I could share everything that I know, but the secret sauce for my business is me. And that's the same for everybody who runs a business. So I can share everything there is to know about running an IT business. But unless you actually implement it, unless you've got the drive, the passion and the desire, which comes from within, you're not going to be successful at it. So for me, I wouldn't say there's a culture of hiding things within the UK specifically, but certainly from the US, I learned how to be open and honest with things.
Interesting point. And I agree with you. America does have that celebration of success, belief in the idea, and maybe even belief in the person. That maybe that's the part that we just think of differently in the UK. And, whether you're from America or the UK, I think you can benefit from going and experiencing other cultures everywhere.
Yeah.
We've also spent some time in Argentina and Ireland and Portugal and Spain, and each one taught me something different, which you bring back home. And it just sort of sets you apart from other people because you have this element of another culture in you. You can probably get the same from books and from learning of some kind. Self-development, which we're going to come on to in a little bit, is a massive part of whatever we do in life, whether it's business, relationships, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely agreed, yeah.
So on your site, you label yourself as putting IT consultants back in control. So how do they get out of control?
Where do I begin with this? I actually wrote a book on the subject, not a cheap plug at all, but I get asked this question so often. Now, having run an IT business myself, I absolutely empathize with I was going to say the perils, but the challenges of running not just an IT business, but any business. I think it's specifically for the IT industry, though, people who run IT businesses are usually very technically solid. I jokingly said I'm a geek at the start of it, at the start of the interview. Absolutely. I love technology. And most of my peers, most people who run IT businesses love technology. They love fixing things. They love playing with technology. They love moving forward. But of course, being really good with technology does not make you a good business person. You have to learn HR, employing people, unfortunately letting people go. You have to learn sales and marketing, which for a lot of people is a really big challenge, talking about yourself and blowing your own horn and things like that. And there's all manner of skills that you need to learn, finance and everything else. So in answer to your question, I think IT business owners and business owners in general can get overwhelmed by the amount of things that they need to do. And what they end up doing is just spending all of their time firefighting, jumping from one thing to another and just keeping the business sort of lurching forward rather than, putting processes, putting systems in place, slowing down, regaining control, and really looking at where they want to go with the business, how they want the business to serve them. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is really help people avoid all the mistakes that I made when I was running an IT business and put themselves in control and focus on what's important.
Great stuff. You mentioned there bringing in systems and process and how, from what you've been describing, that sounds like a key thing. From your point of view of what helps a business grow and become more prosperous. Is that because it helps a business owner control those fires you were talking about? Or is it more about something that's easier to pass on to team members?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's an element of both of those pieces in the answer, I think. Certainly for me, it was probably around 2004, 2005 when I alluded to the fact I wanted to go from owning a job, being a one-man band IT consultant, sort of crawling under desks and fixing things, to that owning a business. And a business essentially means intellectual property, systems and processes, enabling other people to get on with the work. If you are the business, you don't really own a business, you sort of own a job. And I read a book that perhaps many of your listeners will be familiar with. It's called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. Very, very famous book. And perhaps if anybody listening to this hasn't read that book, I would highly encourage them to go and do so. But what the fundamental story in the E-Myth is, to try and get stuff out of your head, get it down into systems, processes, documentation, to allow other people within the business to get on and to do the job. And so the initial drive for me documenting and systemizing my business was that. I jokingly say I'm a lazy man. There's an element of truth in that. But what I find by documenting things, by getting stuff out of my head, it first of all enables me to get things done when perhaps my energy levels are not so good. I don't know if you've ever been there, Phil, but some days when you wake up and it's like, don't really want to do this. I find that having a documented process for doing things that, even the things that I know how to do, by having a documented process, I can almost go into, dare I say, zombie mode. Follow the process, follow the tick boxes. It helps to deliver consistency. It helps to get things done successfully. But the other benefit of processes is you can then delegate those to other people. Now, when I was running the IT business, I had a team of employees around me. Employees come with their own challenges, managing employees and so on and so forth. Now that I'm an IT business growth expert, I'm actually essentially a one-man band. However, I surround myself with a team of virtual assistants, Team Tubb, as we sort of jokingly call them. That team, the reason they work is they're all experts at what they do. But instead of me being the bottleneck to the work happening, I dump the stuff out of my brain, put it down into processes and documentation. And Judith and Holly and Ross and Col and the other members of my team can just get on and do things. Obviously, they still have questions from time to time and things, but they're really good at what they do. In fact, they're better than me at what they do. And so having systems and processes enables them to get on and to do things. So I think bottom line is, if you want to grow a business, if you want to build a business, you've got to get that really important information and systems and processes out of your head, down into some sort of documentation, and then it opens up all sorts of possibilities for you to delegate and to do things when you're a zombie.
Loads of great points there, Richard. And I think the first thing I want to say is everything you're discussing there is relevant to every business.
Yeah.
It really is. I love the phrase own a job, not own a business, because I've been there. And I think everyone that goes on a business journey have felt that reality where you realize, hang on, we're not getting anywhere here because there's only so much time in my life. It's just me. Everything depends on me. I'm the bottleneck. That was another great phrase that you used. I think a lot of my team would say that about me still now.
And ditto for me, Phil. Absolutely. Just yesterday, Gudrun, who was on my team, she got in touch and she said, "Have you done this yet?" And I said, "No, I haven't," because it was left down to me. And of course, Gudrun's fairly new to the team, but she's rapidly learning that if she breaks the job up into component parts that minimize the amount of things that are just reliant on me, stuff gets done a lot faster. So
so that fantastic point you've made there about getting things out of your head and into systems. How does a busy person who owns a job start that process? How do they stop firefighting, as you said earlier on, and begin to do something that sounds like a great big... When you mention that, get everything out of your head, I imagine this huge file on my desk of the size of the Bible almost.
Yeah. And that's a really good question. In fact, I was, giving a presentation to a room full of IT business owners in Manchester just a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about this, the whole process of getting stuff out of your head. And of course, the obvious question is, where do I start? The business there's so many things going through my head. So I'd like to, in answer to that question, start with why you would want to do that. So I've already mentioned delegation. I've already mentioned, consistency and success. There's one other huge reason that should compel you, to get stuff out of your head. And I'll talk about how to do it next. But I think the biggest point is, if stuff is in your head, you're essentially what I call an SPF, a single point of failure. And what I mean by that is, if you get knocked over tomorrow, God forbid, or something else, or a life event happens, the business stops with you. There's no way to carry things on. It's terrifying, isn't it? You and I have both run businesses, Phil. We know what it's like being the bottleneck. But imagine being the bottleneck, and not just because you can't. You haven't got the time to do things, but because you can't do things, because you're laid up in a hospital bed, or there's a life event or something. And I say that from the position of somebody that last year, it happened to me not once but twice. I was actually back in February last year. I was knocked over in a hit and run accident. Which wow. is not very much fun at all. Let me tell you, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I'm sort of joking about it now, but at the time, it could have been a lot worse than it turned out to be. But that incapacitated me, and thankfully, I've got my team around me. They were able to keep things ticking over for me. And then, unfortunately, I ended up in hospital again in a serious situation in September, where I was taken out of action for the best part of a couple of 3 months. So for anybody who thinks, well, it won't happen to me, because we all live that way, don't we? We all think, it's never going to happen to me. It did happen to me, and it happened to me twice last year. So when I talk about getting stuff out of your head and down into systems, I don't do so because it's some wonderful theory. I'm actually, thankfully, living proof that whatever business that you run, getting stuff out of your head, getting it down onto systems and processes enables you to have a business, as opposed to, lying in a hospital bed and thinking, I wish I'd have got this stuff out of my head before, because I really don't want to be bothered with the business right now, but I need the income to carry on coming in. So I thought I'd share that, because for me, that's a compelling reason for anybody listening who's sort of on the fence about, sounds like a lot of hard work. Do it whilst you have the opportunity to. But in answer to your question, how to do it, when there's so many different things about a business that need to be documented, just slow down and do the next thing that you need to do. It could be your VAT return. It could be, in the IT industry, setting a new PC up for somebody or a new printer. Whatever your business is, whatever the process is, slow down, document it. And when I say document it, I literally mean just pick up a pen and paper and write down the steps that you take. You can use fantastic systems afterwards, technology and things, to make these processes better and look pretty and everything. But at the end of the day, pen and paper works best. Slow down, document what you need to do to achieve whatever that process is. And you've got the very first page of your operation manual for your business. And then going forward, just try and slow down again for each thing that you do. Instead of being in this constant, I've got to get this done and out the door because there's not enough time, you'll never make any forward progress that way. So I really think it's important to slow down, document it, and over time, you start to build up all these different processes. So it's build a little bit at a time. Don't try and do everything all in one fell swoop.
Great points. The first thing I want to say is I hope this year's been better than last year for you.
It's been great. So I should say, just in case my wife is listening to this, last year wasn't a bad year by any means. Now, I was in hospital twice, granted. Yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I did actually get married to Claire, my wife, moved up to Newcastle upon Tyne. And 2017, I'm grateful to say, has been a fantastic year. Living here by the coast in Newcastle, absolutely loving it. So please don't worry, everything's good here.
That's great to hear. It's great to have you on the podcast too.
Cool.
That ideology of taking more time and documenting as we go sounds a great starting point. How do you achieve that with kind of rushing deadlines? I can imagine in IT, things go wrong. That's probably when the stress points come.
Yeah.
When a server goes down or something happens that causes that to happen. We have an equivalent in web marketing where something needs to be done by 4 o'clock, and we get told this at 2 o'clock or something of that kind. Mm-hmm. So do you think those are moments where we should document as well? Or is it the other moments which I think for most of us are more common, where we do have a bit more of a planned day? Is that the moments in business which you're talking about, or do you mean everything?
Yeah, I think on one hand, yes, I do mean everything. But to sort of counter that a little bit, I would first say that I think most of us try to do too much stuff, myself included. To this day, you know, if there's a space in the diary, there's the tendency to try and fill it up with things. I think more of us would benefit from creating a little bit of margin, a bit of buffer in our life, giving us that breathing space to slow down and to reflect. So that's the first thing to say. I know that's easier said than done, but, you know, do less and do it better rather than try to do absolutely everything. But in terms of, you know, when you've got that really tight deadline, something comes up, it's really stressful in the moment. It's really stressful when you've got to do it. You've got to get something out of the door. And when you're stressed and when you're rushing, that's when mistakes happen. How many times have we sat down to do something in a rush and just thought, oh, I wish I had a checklist, or I wish I had some way of just doing a sanity check here, just to make sure what I'm doing is the right way of doing it. Or I wish I was more organized. I wish I had this to hand, that to hand, you know, whatever it is. Now, it might not be the right time for you to slow down and document the entire process then, but if you keep a pen and paper to hand, it might be as simple as saying, you know what, I've been here before, or I guess I'm going to be here again with this type of emergency. What are the key pain points that I'm experiencing as I'm going through it? How does it make me feel? And then when you've got time afterwards, perhaps you're sitting down with a glass of wine later that night or over the weekend, you could look back at the written notes that you've made and say, you know what, I'm going to do something about that now that I've got the breathing space, so that the next time that emergency happens, I've got some preparation for it, and I, instead of just going on adrenaline and memory, I can go back to that process, however it looks, and to rely on that a little bit more. And so for me, that's the way certainly I do things. I'm blessed at the moment in that I don't have very many emergencies within my business, but when I was running the IT business, that was a common occurrence. Everything felt like an emergency. Making time to review afterwards, making time to go back and document certainly helped me to move the business forward.
Great points. One thing that I can really see, I've also read the E-Myth myself, not the E-Myth Revisited, the one that kind of came before that. And I can really see how that book and that ideology has influenced you. And one thing you do on your website, which I really liked, was you share your book reading list. Mm. So, you know, that point you've made there about relaxing later on in the evening with your glass of wine and going back over the day and seeing how you can improve what happened, document it, and also noting down how you feel, which is a massive part of business, isn't it? When we do have those days that you spoke about where we're quite zombified and we wake up and we don't feel too great, it's generally because we didn't feel too great about what happened the day or the days before. Mm. When we feel good about things, everything is easier. You've just got married, Richard. Life is great right now, I'm sure for you. Mm-hmm. That first time of being married is so exciting, and it helps us in everything we do. So how much of business do you actually feel is personal development?
That's a great question. The short answer would be a huge amount. I think leadership, whether that be, you're running a business, you're in an organization, whatever it looks like, we're all leaders at some level. We could be parents, we could be husbands, we could be wives, brothers, sisters, there's people in our community. Everything that you do is demonstrating leadership at some level to somebody, I think. So I think personal development is massively important. And I'd also say personal development is not something that you is not something that needs to be put off until tomorrow. It's not something you need to get round to doing. Oh, I'm going to do personal development. It's a way of life. It's just something that's built into your habits and routines. If you're doing it every day, day in, day out, it just sort of bleeds into the rest of your life and enables you to become better at everything that you do. I'll give you an example. So, we're talking about books and we're talking about reading. I'm an avid book reader. Most people that I know would like to read more books, but don't, because they say, where do I find the time? I was one of those people. There was a mountain of books that I was looking at and was like, oh, I'll get round to reading them at some point. And to be fair, that there's still, a pile of books that I wish I could read. But what I did this morning, Phil, before we came on the call, I sat out in the back garden this morning with a cup of green tea. I picked up my Kindle and I read a chapter of a book. And I do that every single day. I meditated afterwards, but let's put the meditation to one side for now. Just getting up and reading a book part of my morning routine means that if I do nothing else that day, if everything else goes to hell in a handbasket, I've at least done some personal development. At least I've enriched my mind. I've moved things forward. And what I actually find is by doing that every morning, by reading a chapter of a book, it preps me. It sort of sets me up for the day in the right mindset to go forward and to tackle other things. So that's an example of a habit that I've built in. If I can throw one other out there, we're recording a podcast at the moment. I'm a huge fan of podcasts. There's so much, dare I say, virtual mentorship that people can get from listening to very successful people on podcasts. I listen to a podcast every day. And I do that I go out for a walk every day because it's really easy. I work from home. To sit behind your desk and to just work and work and work and never get any exercise, that's not good for you. So I combine going for at least a 30-minute walk every day with listening to a podcast. Do that every single day, rain or shine, go out for a walk, listen to that. And I've got a bit of, healthy exercise going on there with the walk. I'm also listening to the podcast, nourishing my mind, helping with my personal development there. So I think there's two examples of personal development that in the same way that I clean my teeth every morning and every evening and just don't think about it, it's a habit, it's a routine that I've built in. I go out for a walk, I listen to a podcast, I read a chapter of a book every morning. It's just something I do without thinking of now. And building those habits in, cumulatively, you find that it bleeds into all areas of your life and just makes you better at what you do. So,
great stuff. I think what it also does, you mentioned before about creating your business to serve you and not the other way around, where you're serving your business. And because you're beginning your day in that beautiful manner, I could see you there, Richard, outside, the sunshine hitting you, green tea in your hand.
Well, sometimes I live in Newcastle upon Tyne, remember? So, yeah.
We can't guarantee sun every day.
Yeah.
But because you've designed that beginning, that's an example of the business serving you.
Yeah.
You're creating your day in the way that you want, rather than waking up, switching on your phone and your email dings and there's 3 problems in your mind right away. That's the other way around, isn't it? So I can really see how that gives you space. A lot of what you're talking about is space and time and how we use it.
Yeah, it is. And I think anybody can achieve that. Now, I'm very, very conscious. Back when I was running the IT business, if I'd have listened to this podcast and somebody like me, I would say, yeah, that's all well and good for you. You've sold the business, you've moved on and everything. But these are things that I implemented when I was running the IT business, when I was in that sort of chaotic, it felt a bit like drowning. It is possible for everybody to do. It isn't an overnight transformation. Try to work on one habit at a time. So if you believe that, the morning routine that you've got is unhealthy or unhelpful, what could you do about changing that? Could you get up 15 minutes earlier every day? Could you decide not to turn the phone on until you've read a chapter of a book? That type of thing. Implement one thing and you'll find that the success of building that one habit sort of bleeds into everything else that you do. That's the best advice I think I can give about building habits and changing where you are.
Great stuff. And we've definitely drifted all the way from our original questions in this podcast, but that's okay.
Forgive me. Yeah, it's one of my habits.
That's all right. This has been a great chat, and I think a lot of your message is something that certainly resonates with me, and I'm sure it's going to with lots of our listeners too. I think people are looking for a different way to do business, Richard. I really do, and I think maybe what's changed since, you and I think are about the same age, since we went through the rise of the entrepreneur in the 80s in the UK. Is I think people put more value on lifestyle now. So life has come up to sit alongside work, whereas maybe in our early days it was the other way around. And you can see very much a lot of what you speak about is creating a business that enables a life and not the other way around. All good things.
Yeah.
So Richard, what's next for you and your business?
So I mentioned the book earlier on, if I can give a cheap plug for that.
Plug away.
Thank you. The IT Business Owner's Survival Guide. And it's basically, I got asked that question about getting out from under so often. And I'll let you into a little secret. I think, you touched upon it earlier. Even though the book's called the IT Business Owner's Survival Guide, I've actually had quite a lot of people from outside the IT industry buy it because they said, "Hey, Richard, do you realize this is applicable to any business?" And I'm like, shh, I want to keep pretending I'm in the niche for the IT industry here. But the reality is, it is applicable to any industry. But what's coming next for me? I've got a busy few months of speaking events around the country. I do a lot of public speaking, which is a huge challenge for me, actually. I don't mind sharing. I get very, very nervous about speaking. It's something that I've worked on. It's outside my comfort zone, but I sort of push myself to do that again and again. And going forward, working with more IT business owners. There's a lot of people who get in touch with me and are brave enough to say, you know what, I'm flailing a little bit. I'm struggling with this. Could you help me with it? And so I want to help more people as best I can. So that's the focus for the next few months.
All sounds good. So where can we find you online?
Sure. Well, I think the quickest way is to search for Richard Tubb, Tubb, on Google. You can find me there, or as one of my clients said to me the other day, why are you all over the internet? How did you write it? There's that. But my blog probably would be the first place to go. So I guess if anything I've said here sort of strikes a chord with any of your listeners, although my blog is aimed at IT business professionals, the reality is there's a lot of personal development stuff, a lot of technology stuff that's applicable to everybody. So www.tubblog, that's TUBBLOG.co.uk. And I'm also on Twitter, LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to continue the conversation with your listeners there.
Great stuff. Wonderful things. So, Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. You've set my day off in a positive light, which is one of your aims. So any final message you'd like to give to everybody?
Yeah, I think if you're listening to this and anything struck a chord, but you're thinking, I'd love to do that, but I just don't know how, reach out to somebody. It could be, yourself, Phil, it could be me. Go along to a local business networking group and speak about what you've heard today, and see if there's any way that you can break your assumptions about moving your business forward. If you're not happy where you are, carrying on doing the same thing is not going to get you where you want to be. You've got to change something. So I hope the advice or the stories that I've shared here provide some motivation for people to do that.
I'm sure they have. Great stuff. Thank you so much for being here, Richard. It's been a pleasure. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Cheers, Phil.
My name is Phil Byrne, and I'd like to thank you so much for listening today. I hope you got something really good to take away from this week's episode for you or your business. And you know what? I'd like to give you something more. In fact, I'd like to give you a whole free web marketing pack full of all my latest and best ideas on how you can take your business forward positively online. Download your pack at positivesparks.co.uk/pack. And most of all, guys, look forward to seeing you again next week.